got these two Taurus Model 94. They're 22 long pistols in. Done a couple trigger jobs on them. These things are notorious for, they've got a terrible pull. I mean, they are, 17 pounds or something ridiculous. And if you lighten the springs up or do anything other than just polishing, you drastically affect reliability. If you change your spring rates too much. The problem is, in my opinion, this hammer is so small that it doesn't have enough inertia to light off the rimfire ammunition very well. So because they did this, I believe that they just threw a big heavy spring in rather than redesign or anything and compensated that way. Well, a lot of women purchase these guns and they can't pull the trigger. And so I have worked on these, lightened them up. Wolf used to sell a spring kit for them, but they pulled it because they had too many complaints of reliability problems. Well, I took the factory springs and lightened them, and with the customer knowing that there was a good possibility of reliability issues. Now, they've both come back, and what the deal is one of them was a little bit heavier than the other one, and or heavier of a trigger pull, and they have decided that that one has acceptable reliability. The one that was the lightest trigger pull does not. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tear them both apart. This one here is the one that has the little bit heavier trigger pull, and they're still both this one's like 10.5, 11 pounds. This one's like 8 pounds. And what I'm going to do is tear them both down, of course keeping all the parts separated. That's why I've got this marked here. And I'm going to put different springs in this one, start over, and I'm going to bring these springs back down to match what I've done on this one. And that way they're both going to be right at the same deal. This was experimental. We knew that we were going to run into that. If any of you all have one of these guns and are experiencing the same problems, if you have done anything to lighten it and you're having reliability issues now, one of the things I recommend is if you can find one of the bars, for the hammer bar that clamps on to your hammer here and gives you more of a cocking surface for your thumb. It's usually just a little bar that that tightens on there. You see it a lot on like the Rossi circuit judges and stuff like that, or on Winchesters or things like that. If you can find one that will fit and still allow you to cock it, put that on there, because that'll give a little bit more weight and inertia on that hammer and give it a better chance of lighting off your ammo. Most likely, if you find something like that, it's going to have to be custom fitted to clear here. Number of ways to do that. You could fit on the gun itself, but I would recommend fit on the actual add-on piece. That's going to be the best way to go about doing that, or just get a different gun. So anyways, this is what this video is going to be about, and hope you enjoy it. Alright, this is the heavier of the two pulls. Obviously, check, make sure you're empty. I assume that you guys, my audience, are smart enough to know that. And any of you safety police, find something else to do. Go vote for Nancy Pelosi or something. Now, I had a little bit of an issue on these grips, getting them to stay back together. They did not want to stay on and seal back up, and so I put a little bit of clear silicone, which doesn't hurt anything, but it'll help keep them together. You don't want to be too liberal with that. Once you get that off, you know, they just split. You can just take that piece of hardware and just shove it back in there. The rubber will hold on to it. And if anybody's familiar and used to these, you can see that spring there. See how it looks shiny and it's kind of almost flat on the outside? That's where I have lightened the factory spring. Rather than clip coils off, which actually shortens it, I grind the width of the wire itself off all the way up and down the length of the spring. That reduces your spring tension without reducing the at-rest length of your spring. There we go. These are primer trays. They're great for just all kinds of little shims and stuff like that. And it really doesn't matter, you know, which ones you start with. You know, you can do whatever you want. You can, you know, work on your cylinder first if you want to. It's a half a dozen dime to the other as far as what your preference is on what you're going to start with. So, I mean, you know, you guys can just pretty much do whatever you want as far as that's concerned. And that's a good technique that I use on these. You know, I talked to you about these flatheads slipping off and gouging your metal if they get off center. What I'll do is hold it. You know, I'll go ahead and get it broken loose, and then I'll hold it kind of in between those three fingers there, and notice this finger is touching the frame, and then I'll just spin it, and that way I can keep it lined up, centered and lined up directly over it. Now I just take and just work my way around. I'm not pressing hard, I'm not scratching anything. I'm just, you just take your time working around it. Just like that. I'm going to show alright, now this larger screw, the one that was just underneath your cylinder here, you can look at its profile. It's actually responsible for holding your cylinder and arm and everything in. You can look down into that hole there, and you'll see where that comes right out. Alright. Now we're just going to set this off to the side. I don't need to disassemble it. I want to show this is actually the cylinder and arm retaining screw from the other one. I showed you that the other one, the one that I just did, actually had a spring and detent in there. This one does not. The screw itself is longer, just a little different. You can see both of my springs the way that they are. Now, what we'll do here, if you look right down in here, see the tip of this sticking out? When I cock this, as I bring this back, it pushes down, and what we end up with is, and that's something, if you already have your cylinder out, it will not cock unless you depress this button here. It'll only go back so far. So you take you a pin or something and depress that button, and then you can cock the hammer all the way. And if you'll look down there on the bottom, you see that little hole right there? That is what we're looking for. We're going to take our punch, stick it right through that hole, and that, once that's in there, gives us a place to hold, and now we can just pull that right out, all in one little unit. What that did was just compress, get that to focus in, that just compresses this, and hold on, I'm going to get this focus fixed, hold on. Alright, here we go. Anyways, I compressed that down and then was able to put that through the hole, and it, when you let the hammer back up, it compresses that onto the plate and pulls it right out. Now if you remove your scribe there, or your pick, that'll go flying. It's not going to, for us right this second, because I'm going to be careful with it. This is another place where these really come in handy. I've got a good place to hold things like this whenever I compress them. Now if you've got your factory spring rate or something like that, you may want to look into getting something to press down on there and hold. But since I've already worked on this, it'll be just fine. I just press down, remove that, and there's that spring. Alright. Now for this, I'm going to move my hand back. Terrible, terrible camera stand. Sorry, guys. Alright. This one's going to be the same thing. Depress it there. And you notice right down there, in there, and then let off the trigger. I just pulled up, and there you go. You can see how that spring looks. It's almost like it's ribbon. Same thing with this one. Primer trays they work great for this. You can also use a small box end wrench. There's all kinds of things you can use for this. Let's see if we can get it to focus. There we go. The old man hands there. Alright. So that's that. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other one. And I'm going to keep these labeled and separated. And what I will do is, in order to get the springs where I want them, each one individually, how do I measure them? What I do is I will retain each one of these here, and I will cinch this into a vise, and then I'll put that over it, and I'll take my trigger pull gauge and I will fix the trigger pull gauge, the hook that would normally go on the trigger, right here on that, and I will pull down on it until, if you see inside of there, see inside of there, the top of my alignment rod, I will measure what it takes to press it down, or I will take something, I'll get a set distance, say like right here, say I'll find something with a set distance inside there, and then I'll measure what it takes, the pressure it takes to compress this down until I touch it, and then I'll repeat that and repeat and repeat, and that's how I measure it, and I'll do the same thing for each one. I hope that made sense. If it doesn't, please let me know and I'll try and explain it a little better for you. Alright, now what I'm doing here to measure the pull on these springs, the pressure, there's no standard to go by or anything like that I'm using. I'm just making sure that the standard is the same for both springs. And what I mean by that is I'm using a punch here, and whenever that comes down, it gives me a good bit of distance there to compress that spring from the end of that to there. And I put that on there, and I have this tighten up in there real good, and you have to hold it on there, to keep it from wiggling out of there, but I'll just pull down and allow it to compress that spring, and what we're doing is we're bringing it all the way down to where it touches the top of that punch, the tip of the punch. And what I can do is with my guide hand here, see, I'm going up and down there, and whenever, as I bring it down and I'm pulling, adding pressure, adding pressure, adding pressure, and once I get to where I can press down on this with my left hand here and it doesn't bounce back up, I'm bottomed out, there's no more downward movement, that's going to be my reading. I'm almost there. See, I'm pushing up and down, but I'm not moving. So that measured 5.5. I'm getting between 5.5 and 6 pounds on this one. Now, keeping it all separate, we will take the other one, put it on there, we'll re-zero our scale, And we're going to do the same thing. Try and turn this sideways here. What I'll do here for this one, let me move this out just a hair. So maybe you all can see. There we go. Alright, pulling down, pulling down. I'll tell you actually what an easy way to do for you all. What you might want to do is just go ahead and take your guide hand and just compress it down. See, I'm not even pulling. Just compress it down until it bottoms out. And then start pulling. And as you get good tension on it, then start bouncing it. And every time I bounce it, I'm pulling down a little bit harder on the gauge until my bounce gets to nothing. And that one's measuring right at, let's see here, still bouncing, still bouncing. That one measures 7 pounds. And so what you want to make sure you do is make sure there's no burrs or anything. I'm going to clean this up a little bit actually just to make sure I'm getting a good accurate reading. But that will just give you some type of baseline to go off of, a way to measure these. Now what I'm doing to actually do the changes to it is I will take something like this punch here, and I'll take that punch and stick it into a piece of wood to hold the tip of it, and then I'll take my Dremel tool with, say, a sanding drum on it, and I will bring that Dremel tool right in here along beside it with it spinning like this. Whenever I touch it to it, it's going to start that spring spinning on the punch as it's spinning, you know, just kind of like gears, and it's going to spin it, and I'll take that and just run that drum up and down it, and what that's doing is it'll spin the spring, getting it uniformly all the way around, and I'm going up and down it, which will get it along the length. And after I've done a few passes that way, I'll turn it over and do the same number of passes this way to make sure that I get both ends properly. When you do that though, you need to watch your middle, because you are actually doing more passes on the middle when you do that. So be careful with the middle and watch it, vary your pressure. And it's the same thing for the little spring, but of course I'll have to have a different punch. Something shorter and something that is smaller in diameter, just as a guide, and that'll help you do that. And again, what I was saying about, if you go in here and you clip these springs, the problem you run into is you're at rest just like this, your length is shortened, which can cause all kinds of problems. If you leave the length and just reduce the wire diameter, you effectively reduce the spring rate without changing your at-rest length, which is very important in a lot of cases. So anyways, that's that, and that's how you measure these, or at least a way to measure them, and do what you need to do. One other thing, just to finish up talking about measuring these springs and the spring rates. What I'll do is I'm going to write down this value now. 7 pounds on this one, okay? But 7 pounds by itself tells you nothing. You need to denote the length of compression. So it's 7 pounds over how much compression, over what kind of length. And so what I'll do is I can look in here and see, let's see here, I can look in here and see the my pen, or my punch in this case, see where it's at. You can see it down in there. And so now I need to measure down to it. I'm not going to be able to fit that in there, so I'm trying to do this where you guys can see. And if you can't see the top of your punch, all you got to do is just rotate your spring a little bit until you get it where you need it. And right there. So we are just under ½ an inch is what our value measured over distance is. We're just under ½ an inch. So what I'll do now is I'll denote that that's 7 pounds, and that is at 0.486 of compression, and then you have a standard value to go by for measuring from here on out. It doesn't matter what the actual spring rate is. All that matters is that I know that this spring works, and as long as I measure all the other ones by this criteria, based off of this standard that I just set forth here, I will have replicas exactly the way I want them. Alright, well, I've been just going through these different springs and checking spring rates and outside diameter, and I've of course trying to match up a modified spring, which I'm not going to be able to find exactly that. So what I found is I narrowed it down to this, a little bit larger diameter than what I've got here, but considering that almost half the diameter of this spring has been ground away, and so I just trimmed it to length. It's just a hair long, and what I did was on the sander over there on the disc, using the table there, I was able to take the spring and put it down at a right angle and face this to, let's see here, make sure we get that, yeah, face that so we can have a good flat cup for it. I'm going to take a hand file and go on the inside to make sure there's no burrs, and then where I cut it, I faced it as well, and I'll do the same thing there. I may actually take and heat this just a little bit, and by doing it I'll actually put some welding heat control paste on this part of the spring to keep the heat from traveling down the spring and changing the temper. But I'll probably end up heating just the end of this and bending this part down to flatten it up to make it look like that. And then I will put it in the niter bluing to get the temper back in that end area. And this is just fine. This is actually, I'm measuring a little bit over the 7 pounds is what I'm looking. I'm looking for 7 pounds. This is measuring a little bit over. And so what I will do is, after I have got the ends the way that I want them, I'll go ahead and start on this like I did this. It won't take much to get it down to 7 pounds. And then this one will be done. And what I'm going to do here is face this spring on the grinder there. This one, on the side that you've trimmed, this spring used to be longer, and that's why I'm having to do this, just facing it up. On the side you've trimmed, the only real way to get this end to look like this end, see where it's kind of double coiled there, is if you were to heat this and compress just a couple of coils there real well. Had to be heated till just completely cherried, almost molten, and then you'd end up having to retemper the entire spring. So like what which you'll see here, you want to just think about what end you're putting where. On this revolver, you've got the lower end, the bottom part, there's a plate that it goes against, whereas the top part here is just the little bump on your guide pin there. So you want to just think about what's going where. What I would do is I would put this end on the plate because you've got a wide area to catch that. And this area here that's a little bit more refined, I would put it where it needs to go, up where there's less for it to grab on. Whenever you are assembling your trigger spring, you notice down in there, see the little ledge down in there inside of the hole? There's a ledge right in there. Then if you look down this side, it is just a smooth taper, no ledge. You need that spring sitting on the ledge. Get focus here. You want that spring to be sitting on the ledge there. You don't want that spring down in that taper. So the shallow ledge is going to be facing the muzzle. Run your ball right down there in the trigger. And I'm going to go ahead and put a little frog lube on there. Down the trigger, and this part is going to go right into your hole down there. Push it down. Make sure that you are in good there. We want to take like a screwdriver and hold it up into its spot. Hold down here and then wiggle out your scribe. There. There you go. Make sure it works. Same deal. Like I said, we'll make sure that it works. What you got to watch out for is that right there rolling on you. Frog lube here, and on this edited spring, you see I've still got a sharp end right there. I'm trying to flatten it as much as I could. This was the virgin end, and it's been factory crimped down. What I'm going to do is put this sharper end, get it to focus in here. The sharper end is going to go down where it rides on this stop plate, because I don't want the top of my guide to be marred up by that. I'd rather have this nice factory end on there. There we go. Notice I just did that by hand. I'm definitely warm enough now. Alright, now, this one's kind of the same deal. What we're going to do is get the ball part of our guide. It's going to go up into the hammer. And right down in here is where our plate's going to go. Now notice how that is right there. See the orientation? It does not go like that. It goes like this. See if I can zoom us in here a little bit better. Now, actually what I should have done was should have had the foresight to run my scribe in this way instead of this way, because now, if you notice, I don't have any way of putting that down there. So what I'm going to do is run this one in a little backwards. I'm actually going to go through the bottom run that in there, and now what I'll do to make this easier, see the big gap between the stop and my plate? If I were to just pull that out, I'd be lucky if it went in the right place. But if I cock the hammer and bring it down to it, now you make sure you're seated in here, make sure you're seated in here properly, and then all you got to do is, let me get zoomed out here, is pull your pin out and let it down. That keeps you from letting it just go flying. So there we go. Now make sure not always the best idea to dry fire your revolvers there, but in this situation, for what I'm doing, it is what it is. Let's see what we've got. That is exactly where the other one measured. That's what we were looking for. This one, before we put the different spring in, was measuring down right at the 8-pound mark. Now we're measuring right up there, which is where the other one is measuring. So our desired outcome initially has been achieved. That's what we set out to do mechanically here. So we'll put this back together, function check it again, make sure that our grips and everything cleared this new spring, and then the only thing we can do is take it out to the range and we're going to test it and see if its reliability is comparable to the other one, and go from there. So now, like I said, what we'll do here, I'm going to actually stop this and I'm going to come back, right back, so I can section it and keep it in chapters here. But I'll do the plate and the grip install. Okay, right back here. There we go. These screws are just screws that I just threaded them back in by hand, just so I didn't lose them. There we go. There we go. Make sure everything's in good. You've got a lip right there that you want to make sure you get tucked up underneath there. There we go. Butt of the hammer. Even brass can mar that. We're going to go with blue Loctite. No reason to run red Loctite on it. I mean, blue Loctite's plenty strong. Now, on this one here that goes up front, that's the one that's responsible for holding your cylinder arm and everything in, and it's actually got a spring and this little, it's a detent that's built in there. So whenever you put your blue Loctite on there, you don't want to get it down into there. You want to make sure to keep it out of your detent. You don't need much. And it's a good idea to go ahead and make sure that your cylinder is at home here. It's where it's supposed to be. That way you know that this is going to be going into the right slot. go ahead and function check it again just to make sure. I'm going to go off camera. I'm going to clean off this silicone here, and I'll be right back.